Hello, welcome. Oh my gosh, my voice is booming. Come and listen about regenerative ag and how to infuse regenerative ag into business models. Very excited to be here. How fabulous is this? Thank you, the Sustainable Angle. This gets better and better every year. It is just fantastic. It is so inspiring. I'm Dr. Helen Crowley. I'm a co-founder of Nature Matters. I'm a wildlife biologist by training, but I've worked across corporate sustainability and finance and advisory. And here I am to facilitate this amazing panel, which just looking at the panel, you get that Regen Ag is now a real thing. It is no longer just why do we do regenerative, it is how we do it, but more importantly, it's how much do we do it. How do we move from pilot to business as usual? How do we infuse the principles and the outcomes of Regen Ag across the business? And that's what we're going to talk about today with this fantastic panel. They say you can only keep track of 5 things at any given time. I have 6 to keep track of. It's going to be hard. We're going to try and do a question and answer at the end, but we might not get to it. However, there is a QR code somewhere where you can send in your questions, and I will pick out some of those, so please do that. I also have to remind you that given we've got a short space of time, if you want to meet this wonderful panelist and you want to see the displays, there is the Regen Ag displays, and please go and spend time there if you haven't already. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about data, delivery of outcomes, collaboration, communication, and how to build regenerative models across business models. So let's get started. I'm going to ask the wonderful Juliette of LVMH to sort of set the scene of how LVMH is viewing the regenerative ag and biodiversity and all the things that they're doing across that. And then we'll start moving through the panel, which represents, by the way, a whole lot of different supply chains and different parts of the supply chain. So Juliette, please.
So at LVMH, we know that nature is in the middle of everything. Why I'm saying that is because I would say that every product that we have for fashion and leather goods, for cosmetics, and even for wine, obviously, are linked to the nature. So we know that we have an impact on the nature, and also that we need to preserve the nature, because without nature, there is no business. So we try to reconnect business and nature at the very beginning, and one of our objectives is to regenerate by 2030 5 million hectares of fauna and flora. So to reach this objective, regenerative agriculture appeared like a solution, because agriculture is the key, and so we start implementing some projects. As LVMH, you probably know that we are a little bit far from the ground, from the farmer, from the agriculture. We have like many layers in the value chain. So sometimes it's hard to implement projects. So we need to work with reliable partners. And so I'm here today with one of the most iconic partners that we have here. And so I will let the floor to our partners to let them explain how we work to transition to regenerative agriculture.
Thank you. And what's really particularly interesting, many things I'm sure are very interesting about Juliette, is that she's an agronomist. So you have this scientist in the heart of the brand and heart of corporate, helping sort of support the outcomes that come from regen, the climate, the nature, the livelihoods, and build that into the brand proposition. So let's move on now. Speaking of brands and brand ambassadors, Masami, and an interesting supply chain that you work in, and from the farmer perspective as well. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yes. Hello, everybody. So I'm Masami Lavault, and I am a flower farmer. I do not work in the textile industry. I run 2 organic farms in Paris, in and around Paris. And I am also the face and brand ambassador of Flower, which is a fragrance by Kenzo Parfums. So I'm actually a trained industrial designer and studied at CSM. So, but I quit everything to go work on biodynamic and organic farms in Morocco, in the UK, and in Japan. And then I went back to Paris to found my own urban flower farms. So 10 years ago, the first one in Paris, and about 2 years ago, a second one, much larger, around Paris. And both my plots, both my soils are heavily polluted. So I've come to develop a very, very strong focus on rebuilding soil health. So I do use no-till practices. I hope it rings a bell. Also, effective microorganisms, biodynamic preparations, and oxygenated compost teas. And I'm very happy because the last soil tests from my oldest farm actually came back very positive, and the soil life has improved, which is very good because it's a very slow process. And whilst I was fermenting all my soil potions and growing my flowers, a luxury cosmetic brand came to me and asked me, a simple farmer, to become their face and their brand ambassador for one of their biggest fragrances for flower. So I said yes. And since then, Kenzo Parfums has been investing quite heavily in our common educational programs and also our common organic regenerative farming projects. So just imagine if all luxury brands would do the same. I think the impact would be so great. And I really do believe that luxury brands in particular can play a very, very crucial role in increasing the rate of adoption of sustainable practices. They have the means to craft narratives in which the most sustainable lifestyles, products, and experiences are also the most desirable. And they also have the means to support all farmers who would be willing to turn towards agricultural best practices. So I really do think that authentic partnerships, authentic farmer and brand partnerships like the one we've developed with Kenzo Parfums can very much pave the way for a new norm in business.
Thank you. And I just love the story of the power of regenerating the soil, but also how that gets taken up in an authentic way. Thank you. Now we're going to stay with farmer and field because that is where a lot of the real outcomes come from, although it takes the whole supply chain to drive that. Obviously, the regenerative outcomes come from the field. So Seyhan, farmer, supplier, Turkey, gone on the regenerative and organic journey. So tell us a little bit about your journey, but also about moving forward, how you see that being replicated and scaled. Sorry, I have my back to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to share our regenerative journey. SOKTAS is well known as fabric producer, but not much as farmer. But in fact, we manage all cotton production cycle from farm to finished fabric. And today I will be speaking with two hats, as farmer and textile supplier. Our regenerative journey started in year 2019. With the encouragement of Stella McCartney. And then in the following year, we partnered with WWF with a vision to transition all our region into regenerative agriculture. And since then, our project is expanding every year with the ongoing support of LVMH. And over the 6 years period, of course, we have faced many complex challenges. But what we have learned is scaling regeneration requires three key elements: mindset shift and real investment at farm, and most importantly, shared responsibility across the value chain. And changing mindset of farmers is not easy, and we knew that. But what happened is, we learned the importance of the regional champions in the ground, because when farmers sees the actual results from their peers, belief spreads, and the collective momentum is powerful. And that's why we have focused on building regional cooperative to promote shared knowledge, and our collaboration with WWF further amplified our efforts on the ground. And yet, surprisingly, convincing farmers was not the hardest part. The biggest challenge was, and still is, the lack of cost and risk sharing. And, even the farmers are willing to change, are convinced with the long-term benefits. They can't do this alone. So if you want real progress now, brands must take the lead in by investing in partnerships and supporting the transition in the ground through direct or some innovative financing methods. And this support needs to also cover the data and monitoring, which is crucial for trust and also impact measurement. And thanks to LVMH funding, our soils are monitored by Genesis, and this gives us opportunity to adapt our practices based on real data. And then it gives LVMH the confidence on the impact. And another important thing which helped us was the technical assistance. Stella McCartney connected us with the leading molecular biologist, scientist, Dr. Johnson, and whose guidance on adaptive regenerative practices and biologically enhanced agricultural management was really the game changer and invaluable. But the work doesn't stop at farm. And regeneration is a long-term commitment, and it requires the same buyers. And if we want regeneration to be norm, it has to be embedded in the procurement strategies. Without long-term commitments at fair prices, even the most successful farm projects cannot sustain. And, you know, everybody talks about margins. It costs more to be sustainable, but it's not the only case. And we should not overestimate the mindset and the education across the value chain. You know, it's not just the farmers, but also brand decision makers and sourcing teams, and eventually consumers need to have a deeper understanding of what regeneration really is. One of the breakthrough moments for our project was and when LVMH decided to bring 35 decision makers into our fields. And Guilaine was part of the group. And they walked the fields, they talked to farmers, scientists, and they saw the impact with their own eyes. And that was the pivotal moment when our project moved from interest to action, and also from storytelling to real committed commercial relationships, right?
All right.
And you know, another very important thing, we have to invest in the next generation. And we are proud to collaborate with Maison Zero to equip the students with the real world experiences and tools to be part of this transformation. And I would like to thank Carole and Alexander for their leadership and vision. And let me end with this. Now, farmers, we don't need charity. We just need partnerships.
Yep.
Okay? Regeneration cannot be norm through transactions. It requires co-creation, where both parties contribute and benefit. And yes, it is possible. Our collaboration with LVMH is a proof. And I hope we inspire other brands, more brands, to follow. That regeneration can be norm, not the exception. Thank you.
Thank you. You are brilliant, brilliantly articulated.
We just shared what we had to go through.
Fantastic. She said to me before the panel, English is not my first language. I'm not sure. I'm like, English is my first language. I couldn't have been that articulate about it, the challenges and the next steps. And you also did a brilliant segue to Carole and Maison Zero, and moving to the other end of the supply chain and embedding this in design and design thinking. So please tell us a little more.
Yeah, thank you. And I really want to echo your comments, Seyhan, because I think in relation to design, it's not just the procurement, the sourcing team. The designers have to accelerate and facilitate that transition to regenerative agriculture. But that starts with the knowledge of what is regenerative agriculture, what impact it has on climate, on biodiversity, on the farmers, their resilience, their capacity to survive. And I find that still too often you have designers in their sort of creative bubbles. You know, it's beautiful designing the extraordinary, it's great, but there's such a focus on that creative moment. There's too often a disconnect with the knowledge of how do we grow a fiber. And if you think of a Michelin star chef, we would not accept that they don't know a potato grows in soil. You know, we take it for granted. A chef knows you grow a potato in a soil. Yeah, I still meet designers, fashion designers today, who don't know that viscose is made by cutting trees and destroying forests. Why? This is a paradox. We have to make sure that, yes, we have to really embrace creativity. This is, part of the economic engine behind the fashion industry. But you have to really make sure they're informed creative decision and reconnect the knowledge of the farmers. I think every designer should go to a farm, sheep farm, cotton farm, understand what does it mean to do organic or organic regenerative farming. And the other comment I'd like to make is still, again, a comment on a design bubble. I still see a lot of brands where they have their design teams somewhere in a building. Often, the CSR team is in another building, another floor, and they rarely meet. And these sort of impromptu conversations, you walk through a little bit, your experience you had, you just connect. Oh, I've seen this. Oh, SOKTAS has released the latest, long staple fiber. Look at this. You create all these, little moments of, share and exchange. And that's how you make sure the designers are constantly on board with the impact of their decisions. And the designers we teach at Centre Saint Martin's, when you teach them this approach to regenerative design, we now have a master's in regenerative design. And we're teaching them to think about the consequences of their decision. You can be sat in your studio, designing your collection. That one decision to say, I want the regenerative cotton from SOKTAS, will help species survive, will help resisting droughts, in terms of, particular, in Turkey, you have extreme heat from time to time. And that decision is very empowering. It gives agency to designers. So it's very important that we ensure that whether it's at educational level, whether it's mid-level designers who need further training, staff development, we need to make sure designers understand what regenerative agriculture means, what that looks like, what that feels like, and therefore design to support it.
Thank you. Lovely. So let's stay in the sort of moving into the other part of the supply chain. Guilaine, would you like to talk about leather? Or you do a lot of raw materials, but how did the regenerative moving from design into sort of operationalizing that in the supply chain? And would you like to talk a little about that?
Yes. So as a brand and I belong to the purchasing department, and you're right, I'm in between the designer speaking about their needs and the farmers. So from one day I'm in the studio, the other one I'm on the ground. And for us the challenge is really, we are all convinced in the company and in the group that regenerative raw materials are the future. For some materials, as for the cotton for instance, there is already some initiatives and the work is already ongoing. And as a leather good company, we were thinking, okay, how to apply regenerative agriculture to leather, which is one of our main raw material. As far as we know, coal doesn't grow on the soil. So even if we are very humble with our knowledge, and we said, okay, let's try to apply also and to see how the principle of regenerative agriculture could be applied to leather. So we were in the farms, thanks to all the actors of the supply chain and cooperation. Of course, I don't have the direct link from IOFIS to all the farmers who are delivering the skins to my tannery. So with the tannery, with some traders, with some slaughterhouses, we've been in the farm all over the world where we are buying some leather. And we try to understand, because it's not our job, but as you said, we want to go and to understand really from the ground and on the floor what happened, not to decide, okay, we want these practices, and we will not learn to the farmer or to the breeder how it will work. It's not our job. So we need to understand how we can work together. And we did a kind of definition of what is a regenerative breeding system. We asked to LVMH scientific committee to approve it, because it needs to be approved by third party, by scientific, by agronomists, by farmers. And with the kind of, with the grid assessment, we are already now able to assess some practices and to see which one, and most of them this was a good surprise, are already in very good and regenerative practices. So, some of them need to improve. Some of them, it will be more difficult. And now we need to go to a new step. So this was a 2 years project, which is quite difficult when you are in a fashion brand. You are used to work with a quarter, the next show within 3 months, the collection, spring, summer, etc. When you talk about this kind of project, it's 5 or maybe 10 years project. So it's a little bit new for our companies and our brands. And now we need to scale to see more farms and to help and to find some partner in the meat industry, for instance, because as you know, a farmer will not change his practices because Louis Vuitton or LVMH want it. There is no sense. But how all together in the filière, in the supply chain, we can help them, we can support them to all go with more and more virtuous practices in their job. So this is how we work from the ground, very humble. First try to understand and see how we can work all together.
Brilliant. Thank you. And it's not an easy supply chain, the leather supply chain. So well done. And it's great that you highlighted that it just takes time as well. And everyone's expectations have to match that sort of timing, which isn't normal for the fashion or the luxury sector. Maria, thank you for waiting at the number 6. But you get to sort of tell your story as now we're going further down the supply chain, actually up the supply chain. To you as a supplier, as involved in certification, and in the wool sector particularly, and you can talk about other supply chains, there's been a really impressive uptake in understanding about regenerative and regenerative wool. So would you like to talk a little bit about that and also about what you think it's going to take to really scale that even further? Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. So we also have a collaboration with LVMH long-term for regenerative wool. What we see is so important is when we begin the collaborations with the brands, at the beginning, and to really understand how regenerative agriculture can adapt to those nature-positive environmental commitments, you need to provide the data. So this has become, in the last few years, months even, more and more important, and the right level of data and the right amount of data and the adaptation of the data to all the new requirements of the industry, it becomes difficult. So the first step, I think, is you need more internal champions in the brands, in the groups. So we have, let's say, an internal champion with the LVMH environmental team. But this is not always the case. You need to work in all the different, let's say, in the industry and at that end to find more people that truly believe in it. And the way that they will begin believing in it is by understanding it, as we were saying before. So once they understand how this really contributes to their goal, they will begin seeing the benefit. Then the other aspect in terms of that supply chain management, let's say, is that the brands have done, LVMH or the Maisons or any brand have done a journey for over the last few years of identifying those supply chain partners who will get them the fiber. You don't want to disrupt what they've been working on. It's a fantastic level of work that has taken us a long time, a lot of teams involved. So now you bring them, they don't want to see you as a new option that you're putting across the table. It's adding on what they're doing. So working with the great suppliers that they're working, but you're telling them, I'm bringing you the farm. I'm taking the farm, I'm bringing it to the brand. And this is all the knowledge. And then the other extremely important point is that if we're going to be, let's say, customer-centric with the brand, we have to be very centric with the farmer. And what the farmer will want to do, besides learning how they can change their systems because they believe in it, so they believe in, let's say, regenerative, but they want to scale, they want to sell the fiber. This is so important. So when you develop the programs, again, working on both ends and with the supply chain mapping, you need to be able to give the farmers the assurance that the only reason why they're changing their practices, you're identifying those KPIs on biodiversity, the carbon measurements, which is so important, and all the brands are asking for this, but also the social impact. Why is working on this will actually help me improve my livelihood. So that's why it's obviously about collaboration, it's about education, it's about the internal champions, but it's really having the farmer at the center.
It's lovely. And it makes me very happy when I hear that people are asking about biodiversity. And that we're linking that to the other outcomes. So we're de-siloing. It isn't just about doing that one thing for one outcome. It's about doing that regenerative approach for all these multiple outcomes for nature, climate, livelihoods, and how do we track that and measure it and so on. So, and that underpins a value proposition for brands, for everybody. So it's really terrific that we're getting to that stage. A couple of questions have come in. So I want to frame this. There's a couple of questions, and there's two sides to this question. One side of it is, what are the barriers that other luxury brands are facing? Because we've heard a lot about the fantastic work of LVMH, but are there sort of more general points of the barriers that you see across luxury brands? But then the flip side of that, another question that came in, which is linked, is this is not just a luxury play, right? I mean, and how does this become mainstream across the sector? So, Masami, would you like to think about, perhaps from your experience as a brand ambassador, about what you would see as some of the challenges perhaps in luxury, and then whoever would like to respond on mainstreaming regen, and what is also in place, Seyhan or Maria, that this isn't just a luxury play.
Yeah. Well, I talked about desirability, and I think it's really key for now. I think sustainability or sustainable products are starting to be desirable, but it's a very slow start because luxury is still a very lavish industry, and with lavish codes and lavish lifestyles represented as the best lifestyles. So I think this is one big barrier. It's like, it's not sexy enough. I'm not saying I'm sexy, but I think that the fact that I've been chosen as the image for a brand like this is a good sign. It's a very small sign because Kenzo Parfums is a very small maison in the big ship that is LVMH. But it's a good direction. And a second thing I think is that for now, like I used to work as an industrial designer, and I was very sad at the time because I realized that I am working as a human, only with humans, for humans. Like I was just developing objects that are just for humans. And that is not the reality of our planet. Like we're not alone on here. And I think this is just a mental barrier that we're only seeing humans around us. But today, my job is so much fuller than what I did before because I work really on a daily basis. I see them every day. I work with insects, I work with birds, I work with a ton of different animals, I work with plants, I work with microorganisms. That's my daily life. And we all need to go back to this. Like even if you're working in an office or working behind a computer at a design studio, just think, as Carole said, like the decision you can make to use that fiber instead of this one or that gum instead of the other one is that you may save other species. And that I find it so exhilarating. Like when you realize this, it gives you a lot of momentum, I think. But that's really an individual mental shift that can turn into a very, very global.
Carole, would you like to add something about what you see as the barriers from your perspective to really?
Actually, not that I'm an expert, but one of the barriers is the finance system, the way our economics at global scale work. You know, you don't include the cost to nature in the cost of a product. And so it's always about a profit margin. It's always about the low cost, so you can increase your stakeholders' benefit. And I think that's the issue. You know, we don't consider the cost of the destruction of nature in what most of our products are created by destroying nature. And so as soon as, we say, well, actually, it's a little bit more, because, no, profit margin. But that's just very short-termism. We need to start thinking that a product should be costed in relation to also the cost to nature. And designers need to understand that aspect. Designers work for an industry. It's not a philanthropic kind of activity. You design to sustain an economic activity. The creative sector is a very powerful sector. But we need to understand how to do the math to actually include the cost to nature.
Lovely. So I've got a kind of, so on the other side of that question was the mainstreaming idea, and how does this become much more available to non-luxury players? It isn't just a luxury player and isn't just a luxury play. So perhaps I'll start with you, Maria, and then Seyhan, you might have some ideas on that as well. And there's another question that's come through on defining regenerative, and I don't want to go into a metrics discussion. We could go down a rabbit hole of metrics, but I thought, Juliette, maybe we could come back to that. But let's finish this question on, okay, let's broaden this. We've talked about what we can do with other luxury brands, and the challenges, but also how does this mainstream? Maria first, and then Seyhan.
We do see an interest in other fashion brands, not just luxury or premium. Rather than making it mainstream in terms of, let's say, all the collections, they have an objective of a certain percentage by a certain date. So they know that they need to get there. I think they understand that Regenerative itself is a program that takes a long time. So what they need is to see, let's say in their partners, in a partner that's representing the regenerative agriculture farmers like us, that you will be able to help them in that program. So as much, again, going back to those solutions, deliverables, data, as much as you can show them that commitment will come from this work at farm level, and it's achievable and scalable, then they see as a solution. It does take a long time, but I am seeing this certainly not just for luxury brands. A lot of brands they want to, let's say, open up a discussion, understand, get educated. Then there's the whole part about how more people inside the organizations need to know about this. So it's happening. It's just that it takes some time.
Seyhan.
Hi. As Maria said, the luxury brand is not the only part. Actually, if you want a real scale, we need to go to the wider range of brands. And maybe we were lucky from the beginning. We had other brands, supporters apart from LVMH on the commercialization of the product. And when I look at those brands, they really appreciate the work on the ground. Although they haven't supported the transition, at least they contributed with the long-term commitments and the fair price. So that helps the scaling. But what I see as a problem now with most of the brands, they don't want to do anything, but they just, that's the reality, unfortunately, that we are sometimes talking, and, they don't co-create that I was saying, and they just expect that farmers need to provide data and all the safety nets that they can communicate, or even they just plan a small pilot, like one capsule, to tell the story without providing the fair distribution of the benefits. So the risks and benefits should be shared. And in terms of data, I think you don't want to get in. I think, as I understood, is a rabbit hole. I know, because everybody wants everything, but this is cost and complexity. So without considering the feasibility on the ground, you can't ask anything. But I'm happy to say that, I don't know if maybe somebody knows already, there are good initiatives happening over there. For example, I have a privilege to work with Textile Exchange Regenerative Outcome Framework. And there we try to have an outcome framework as a multi-stakeholder approach rather than top-down approach, where all our voices are heard and our capabilities and the feasibility on the ground is considered. And also in the outcome framework, we defined it as not only the farm level expectations, but also brand level expectations to promote this co-creation.
I think it's great that we've touched on. I mean, I don't want to avoid the data question, except we don't have a lot of time. But I think the point that you made is really important. What is the question you're asking? And as a biologist, and you can have a lot of information coming at you, but the question is more around: is my soil getting better? Are my animals healthier? Is there more wildlife on my property? Is there more functionality in the system? And then you choose the indicators that show you that. And so what's really exciting about the regenerative and the regenerative outcome the framework, is we're talking about those outcomes and saying it's not just about practice, it's about these outcomes. And we can track over time how much better that gets and so on. So it's such an exciting place for us to talk about changing the way that we create nature positive outcomes, the way we create livelihoods, and having the outcomes to prove that. So it's data, what data you use to match with those outcomes and say to prove that, it's a whole nother discussion. But there's a lot of really good thinking on that. But
just add one sentence. You can imagine the discussions at the beginning of the working group. The brands were even asking for a Gini Simpson index for the biodiversity. Which farmer can do it?
That's right. So, Juliette, I've given you a bit of time to think. So a lot of people ask this: how do you define regenerative? Processes, outcomes. How would you like to sort of respond to that?
So when I started studying agri-food at the very beginning, like 8 years ago when I started my study, when I was searching on Google what is regenerative agriculture, it was like 2 websites talking about it, maybe 1 or 2 articles, but not more. So when I started working at LVMH, the first thing was to define what is regenerative agriculture for LVMH, for the luxury sector and everything. So we work with a lot of scientists, partners, experts, to ensure that our definition will meet the standards and what we can do on the ground. I mean, like link with the ground, link with the farmers. So for us, it's really about soil, regenerate soil, because everything is linked to soil. If you have healthier soil, you will also have like better biodiversity on your property. You will also have like a water cycle really healthier. Everything works together, I mean. So it's like an holistic approach of agriculture. And also what we searching for is quality of the raw materials, because you can't changing every practices without having like better quality and also profitability, because farmers in the center of all of this reflection, and we don't want changing practices to have like low profitability. So we want to create like a long-term partnership to ensure that farmer can take risks also, because sometimes changing practices imply a loss of yields. And so we need to ensure that we can support farmers every time, because sometimes nature is not that kind. So when you're changing your practices, shifting to no-tillage, for example, at the very beginning, nothing works. So as a company, we need to support farmers financially, I mean, and also technically. So as you said, Seyhan, it's also important to have like all these metrics to measure the benefits and to know how we can change the practices to also improve the soil, yes, but also the yield and how we can grow the crops and also animals.
Lovely. So just one of the other sort of themes of the questions I'm trying to draw out from your questions. Thank you, by the way, for sending them in, some of the more thematic. So one of them is around what are your favorite regenerative, not so much stories, but items that you have or that you wear, or people want to know that we're wearing and living our principles, I think. So I don't know if Masami,
yeah, my shoes. They're not leather. They're corn, and I love them. They were not so expensive, so I think it's a good point. It's becoming more mainstream. But I have to say, I've been looking for shoes like that, not leather and not pure plastic, for about 10 years. And I finally found them. So it takes time to develop such products. And unfortunately, this brand has shut down. So it's not easy to find those products, and it's not easy for those businesses to sustain. But I hope that it will be our future, and that everybody can afford not wearing too many aggressive clothes or shoes and objects.
Thank you. And Maria, did you have one?
Yes, I'm thinking we're working with community programs surrounding some of the farms, and these rural women create these beautiful shawls in merino wool that come from the farms practicing regenerative. So we love these, and this is something that we value a lot because it's not just about the farmers, but also about surrounding communities.
Yeah, and I'll add, this will answer another question that came in. This is an organic cotton silk jacket, which I adore. And so for organic, someone asked, where does regenerative leave organic? Organic is part of the pathway to regenerative. Organic is part of that pathway. It's not siloed out there as a lonely certification or practice. It is part of our whole endeavor to move to regenerate, get these outcomes that we need, because we depend on that, the soil getting better, the wildlife coming back, the functionality that builds the productivity for the farmers. There's some recent work that's been done in my home country in Australia that actually shows when you bring back the natural capital on a farm, on a grazing system, which includes animals and plants, when you bring that back through regenerative practices, you are more productive, you are more profitable. The livelihoods, there's direct correlation between that. So I think this, and organic is part of that journey. It's part of developing practices and working with farmers for what's appropriate, right? So we have 3 minutes left, and I want to ask, perhaps Guilaine, would you like to have, you haven't been able to say a lot so far, so I would like to ask you, moving forward, what would you like to see as the sort of the next sort of iteration of what you're doing? How do we make this really take on more scale, this regenerative work that you're doing in your work?
I think, of course, we would like to get all our materials already regenerative, all our designers already trained and conscious. But I think we need to be patient, which is quite difficult when you are, once again, in a fashion brand, you are not patient at all. So we need time, but I think if everybody is really involved, if we are all talking together, we will find, and I think that nature and sustainability is really between competitors, between sectors, between suppliers and material. It's the common value that we will all have right now and for the future. So I think we need to be optimistic because there is more and more collaboration between all the sector and all the actors in the supply chain. Few years ago, a purchaser, brand purchaser person talking to a farmer, no way. It was even not possible. Today, I'm going to talk to farmers. So it's really funny, and I think this is a sense of the history to talk each other, to understand each other. This is very important, to understand the difficulties of each other. My difficulty is that I have some designers, they want some nice product and qualitative product, and the difficulty of the farmer is very different. But at a certain point, we need to meet, and I'm sure we will meet, and we already meet on a lot of initiative and material, and this is the future. So I think we need to be optimistic because it's going better and better. The communication, the training, and the initiatives and the results, now we can start to get some results. So even if we need to be patient, we already get some results, some measurements, some KPIs, some data, because I know as brand we love data and KPIs. So we start to get, and we ask for them, but we start to get them and to prove to everyone if we need to convince someone. But I think now people are quite convinced. But if we need to convince and to prove that the work we are all doing and that the cost that is involved really is for value, for everyone value and for nature value. So I'm quite happy that we all work on this all together.
You did great. That was a great finish. And it just shows that it isn't just about regeneration on the farm. It's about regeneration across the supply chain. It's a regenerative, a collaborative, a communicative approach, a partnership approach, a new way of doing business that is really going to bring this not just from pilot to business as usual and to have those outcomes that we all need and we can all wear. So thank you to this amazing panel who kept to time and who were brilliant and articulate. Thank you all. And do not forget to go and visit the fantastic displays. Thank you, Sustainable Angle team. You are brilliant and wonderful. Thanks all. Bye.